The woman at the dry cleaners has pressed your shirts for 4 years. She knows you take medium starch. She knows you don't like the collars too stiff. She knows you prefer them on wooden hangers, not wire. She knows your first name. She does not know your last name is on the deed of the strip mall her shop sits in. That's the whole point. It's a Wednesday. 7:22 a.m. You're at a diner 2 blocks from your apartment. Not a trendy spot, not somewhere people take photos of their eggs. Just a diner. Vinyl booths. A laminated menu that hasn't changed since 2009. Coffee that comes in a white ceramic mug with a small chip on the handle that the waitress, a woman named Gloria, has never once mentioned, which you respect. You order the same thing every time. 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast, black coffee, $8.40. You tip $4. Not flashy, not cheap. Gloria thinks you work in insurance. You let her think that. Something about you, the way you sit, the way you check your watch twice before the food arrives, it reads like a man who processes risk for a living. She's not entirely wrong. Your phone is face up on the table. A message from your portfolio manager. You read it once, you set the phone down. You look out the window. Across the street, a 19-unit apartment building you've owned for 8 years just had its boiler replaced. $11,400 out of pocket last Thursday. Total cost of ownership for the month, accounted for. Monthly net after that, $19,600. Clean, done, moving on. You eat your eggs. It started with a storage auction. Not a startup pitch, not a coded app in a garage. A storage auction in a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, on a gray February morning 11 years ago. You were 28. You had $7,200 in a savings account and a job doing facilities coordination for a regional hospital network, which sounds more important than it was. You went to that auction because you'd seen a television show about it. That's the actual truth. You're not proud of the origin story, but there it is. You didn't win the unit you wanted. You want a different one, Unit 114, because everybody else stopped bidding at $340, and something told you to go to $420. Inside, 3 broken bicycles, 2 mattresses, a box of paperback novels, and a filing cabinet. The filing cabinet had a broken lock. You broke the lock. Inside were the original business records of a man who had run a small cleaning company for 9 years before he walked away from his unit, and presumably from a lot of things. The records were meticulous. Revenue, client lists, supply costs, employee schedules. 9 years of a working business abandoned. You sat on the concrete floor of Unit 114 for 45 minutes reading those records. You understood then that someone had built something real, something quiet and cash-flowing and fundamentally unglamorous, and then simply stopped. And the infrastructure still existed. The need still existed. The gap still existed. You drove home, you made a list, you started making calls the next morning. The first contract was with a pediatric dental office in a medical building you'd managed 2 years earlier. You knew the office manager. Her name was Terry. You told her you were starting a cleaning company, and you could undercut their current vendor by 12% and respond faster to complaints. She said she'd give you 60 days. You did not have a cleaning company. You had a filing cabinet and a list of phone numbers. You spent the next 4 days building the structure. LLC, insurance, a commercial cleaning supplier account, 3 part-time employees recruited through a church job board, a van rented by the week because you couldn't afford to buy one. 60 days turned into a year. A year turned into a contract. The contract turned into referrals. By month 18, the cleaning company had 8 recurring commercial clients and was clearing $4,200 a month in profit after labor, supplies, and your van payment, which you'd upgraded to owned by then. You told nobody, not your college roommate, not your parents, not anyone you worked with at the hospital, where you still showed up every day, still processed the HVAC invoices, still made sure the light stayed on. The reason you told nobody was not strategy, not at first. It was embarrassment. It felt too small to mention. And by the time it stopped being small, secrecy had already become habit. Here's what they don't tell you about real money. It doesn't arrive the way you imagined. There's no morning you wake up and feel it like a change in gravity. There's no single deposit, no specific Thursday, no moment where the world rearranges itself around your new position. It accumulates the way sediment accumulates. Quietly, consistently, in the dark, and then one day you look down and there's ground beneath you that wasn't there before. The cleaning company funded the first property acquisition, A duplex in the same suburb where the storage unit was, because you knew that neighborhood, you knew the rental demand, and you knew the seller was motivated, because his daughter's college tuition was due in 6 weeks, and he'd already extended himself on 2 other properties. You paid $138,000 cash. You were 30 years old. The duplex funded the second property, then the third, then a small laundromat whose previous owner had run it into the ground through inattention rather than any fundamental flaw in the business. The location was good. The equipment was functional. The only thing wrong with it was that nobody was paying attention. You drive a 2019 Subaru Outback with 71,000 miles on it and a small dent in the rear passenger door from a parking garage pillar in 2022. You've never fixed it. The dent is useful the way a lot of things are useful. It makes you easy to underestimate. At a dinner party 2 years ago, a man in a very good suit asked what you drove. When you said Subaru, he turned slightly away mid-sentence in a way he probably didn't realize he was doing. You spent the next 10 minutes asking him questions about himself, which is the easiest thing in the world with that particular kind of man, and you learned that he managed other people's money with significant confidence and not especially impressive results. You did not tell him what you drove home to. The apartment is on the 14th floor of a building in a good but not flashy neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, clean lines, the kind of place a moderately successful professional lives, which is the point. You own 4 units in the building. Yours is not the largest. Your neighbor across the hall, a man named Dennis, is a contractor who does finished carpentry and is very good at it. He brings you holiday cookies every December in a tin that he clearly bought with intention. Last spring, he knocked on your door at 10 p.m. to tell you there was water coming through his bathroom ceiling, and he wasn't sure who to call. You told him you'd look into it. You texted your property manager from your kitchen before you'd finished closing the door. Plumber on site by 8 a.m. the next morning. Dennis left a voicemail saying he didn't know what you did, but he appreciated it. He called you one of the good ones. The voicemail is still on your phone. You're not sure why you haven't deleted it. By year 4, the portfolio had a shape. The cleaning company, 7 residential units, 1 laundromat, a parking lot purchased through a county tax lien process that took 4 months to research and execute, and generated $3,100 a month for doing essentially nothing. A small fleet of ATMs placed in convenience stores and gas stations, 8 units total, serviced once a week by a guy named Antoine, who you paid $22 an hour, and who had never once been late or unreliable in 2 years. None of it glamorous, none of it the kind of thing you'd mention at a dinner party, even if you were going to mention any of it, which you weren't. Your accountant at the time, a practical woman named Helen, who has since retired, looked at your quarterly summary and said, "This is the most deliberately uninteresting portfolio I have ever seen." You said, "Thank you." She said, "That wasn't a compliment." "I know." She laughed in spite of herself. That was the beginning of a very productive working relationship. There's a particular feeling that comes right before you move on a distressed asset. It's not excitement exactly. It's quieter than that. A kind of stillness. Your thinking gets less cluttered. The noise that runs constantly in most people's heads just drops. You felt it 3 weeks ago. You were driving back from a site visit to one of your storage facilities, 94 units, 91% occupied, managed by a regional operator you've used for 6 years, when you passed a self-service car wash on the service road just off the highway interchange. Tan exterior, faded signage, a hand-lettered closed for maintenance sign that had clearly been there long enough for the tape to yellow. You pulled over. You sat there for probably 4 minutes, just looking at it. The location was nearly absurd in its quality. 2 lanes of traffic from the highway exit, a gas station on one side, a grocery-anchored strip center on the other. Traffic count, probably 18,000 vehicles a day. You pulled property records on your phone. Owner, a 74-year-old man named Earl, who purchased the property in 1998 and had been paying property taxes from a mailing address in Clearwater, Florida, for the past 6 years. You found a phone number attached to a business registration that hadn't been updated since 2019. You put it in your contacts as Car Wash Earl. You'll call Monday. Not this week, Monday. You don't want to seem like you drove past at 6:15 on a Thursday evening and pulled over to run property records, even though that is exactly what happened. The loneliness is real. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind you lie awake cataloging, just a quiet, persistent reality that there are rooms inside your life that nobody gets to walk into. Not out of coldness, not out of calculation, but because you've learned, the hard way, what happens when those rooms get opened to the wrong people. Your closest friend, a man named Marcus, genuinely one of the best people you know, has been grinding for 11 years to build something that keeps almost working and then doesn't. He coaches youth basketball on Saturdays. He's patient with his kids in a way that makes you think he's a better person than you in the ways that actually matter. He told you last fall, over beers at a bar you both like, that he was thinking about putting his house on a HELOC to fund a franchise opportunity. A smoothie franchise. He'd done the research. He was excited in a way you hadn't seen in a while. You did not say what you were thinking. You did not write a check. What you did, you asked him to send you the franchise disclosure document. You read it that night. You sent him back a 6-paragraph email, written carefully to sound like you'd looked into franchising generally, pointing out 3 specific clauses in the FDD that had historically created problems for franchisees: the territory exclusivity clause, the supply chain markup structure, and a renewal fee schedule that most people don't model out. He called you 2 days later and said the math didn't work once he ran it through. You said, "Yeah, I figured." He said, "How did you know to look at that stuff?" You said, "I read a lot." He said, "You're weird, man." You said, "Yeah." You crossed $650 million in total asset value on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Your current accountant, a precise, unsentimental woman named Carol, who has worked with you for 7 years, and who you consider one of the most important people in your professional life even though you've never told her that, sent the quarterly reconciliation at 2:48 p.m. with the subject line, Q3 Portfolio Summary. You were at a hardware store. Specifically, you were standing in the plumbing aisle, trying to decide whether you needed a 3/8" or 1/2" compression fitting for a faucet repair in your apartment, holding 2 packages, neither of which had sufficiently clear labeling. You read the email. You stood there for a moment. A man in a paint-stained sweatshirt squeezed past you to get to the pipe fittings. You moved aside. You put both fitting packages back and found a store employee and asked which one you needed. He told you. You thanked him. You went to the register. You drove home. You made the repair. It took about 20 minutes and was mostly successful, except for a small drip you fixed the next morning. You made dinner. You sat by the window and watched the neighborhood do what neighborhoods do in October. Leaves moving. Lights coming on in apartments. Someone walking a very slow old dog on the sidewalk below. There was something in your chest that wasn't pride and wasn't relief. It was something more like the feeling you get when a long, complicated calculation finally resolves. A quiet rightness. A recognition. You thought about a 28-year-old in Charlotte, sitting on a concrete floor reading a dead man's business records under a fluorescent light, with $7,200 in a savings account and a van rented by the week. You thought he would not believe it. You thought every boring Friday was worth it, every Saturday that looked like nothing, every deal that nobody saw, every moment of restraint, every dollar reinvested instead of spent. Then you washed the dishes and went to bed. Wednesday morning, diner, corner booth. Gloria refills your coffee without asking. She's been doing that for 2 years. Your phone shows 3 messages from property managers, a lease renewal query from a commercial tenant in one of your retail spaces, and a new notification, a LinkedIn alert for a man named Raymond, 67 years old, who has run a regional pest control company in the Carolinas for 24 years and updated his bio 4 days ago to include the phrase, "Exploring next chapter." You add him to a list. The list has 9 names on it. Gloria comes back around. She asks if you want the check or another coffee. You say another coffee, you've got a few minutes. She pours it. She doesn't know that she parks in a lot 2 blocks from here every morning that's been quietly generating $2,800 a month for 4 years. She doesn't know that the dry cleaner on the corner is in a building you've owned since 2019. She doesn't know that the ATM by the door, the one that charges $3 and she uses when she forgets to go to the bank, is yours. She knows you're the Wednesday guy. Eggs over medium, good tipper. Always seems to be thinking about something. She's not wrong about that either. You open your notebook, you write Raymond's name at the top of a blank page. Below it, some questions. The beginning of a framework for a conversation you might have in 3 weeks in a neutral location over a lunch where you let him talk for the first 40 minutes. Outside the window, the city moves at its ordinary pace. Unhurried. Indifferent. Enormous. You drink your coffee. Somewhere out there, 23 different boring businesses are running without you. That's enough. That's more than enough.